All right, thanks everyone for joining us here. We're going to say what about aliens a little bit, Phnam and myself. I think we should start by introducing ourselves and then we'll discuss the topics we're going to cover here together. You want to start, Phnam?
Sure. Hi everyone. It's very nice to see everybody here. Some familiar faces, some new ones. I can't wait to have direct conversations with you a little bit later. So my name is Phnam Bagley, pronounced like phenomenon. I am a space architect, which means that I design how astronauts live and work in space. I'm also an industrial designer, and my job essentially is to take science fiction and make it real and commercially available, right? Everything from brain implants to wearables to medical devices and everything you can think of. Everything that sounds a little bit fringe, but also great for positive impact in the world, I'm interested in. And so, I was invited on this panel very haphazardly to talk about the subject of aliens. Not because I know anything about aliens, because I don't, but because designing how humans are going to live beyond the bounds of the Earth's atmosphere has something to do with aliens, right? So I can't wait to have the conversation today.
Cool. And where Phnam is taking science fiction and making it reality, I always dreamed, what if the sci-fi about aliens was reality? My name is Graham Lau. I'm an astrobiologist and a communicator of science. My work has gone through realms of geochemistry and mineralogy and studying how organisms thrive in the environment across our planet, especially in polar environments, and how we're using what we find right now for life on Earth and looking for life on other worlds like Mars, the moons of Jupiter, moons of other worlds like Saturn, and exoplanets, which we've now found nearly 6,000 of those. And lately, a lot of my work has shifted more into the realm of conceptual and philosophical issues related to whether or not aliens are out there and what it means for us right now to be asking not just what about aliens, but why about aliens. And so we have a range of topics we could discuss between the two of us and our various interests, ways we can think about communication, about who and what we are, not just for aliens, but for ourselves and thinking of who we are right now in the cosmos. And then also thinking about what happens when we start traveling out to these other worlds ourselves as a species and potentially start maybe interacting with other life forms, perhaps diverging evolutionarily. And so yes, we have a lot of different places we can go. I think we'll have a conversation and maybe invite some audience Q&A after that too.
And talking about audience, last night a lot of us were at the reception. Some of us got lost, in the building and then eventually found it. I happened to meet this woman named Amy Carl, and we struck a conversation about, design, about art, about space, and I'm like, oh my God, you have to be on our panel tomorrow. So I'm officially inviting Amy Carl to join us in this conversation. That's the kind of serendipity that's incredible at XPANSE, or the previous version of this, which was Puzzle X in Barcelona. So you will meet these people who just have this weird alignments, and it's your job to grab that alignment and make magic happen on stage. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So now that you're officially part of this, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Amy Carl. I'm an artist who explores the impact of emerging and exponential technologies on humanity and evolution. I also look at what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human at this time of merging with these different technologies? And my work has brought me into space. 4 projects over the past year in or going to space across a number of missions. And one of these projects is the new version of the Golden Record. How many of you here are familiar with the Golden Record? This is a record that NASA sent out, 2 records, into space in 1977 in an attempt to share the best of humanity with whomever or whatever may find these. Now it's almost 50 years later, and we're making a new version. This one is called the Golden Archive, and we're looking at what do we have to share over the last 50 years? What developments have we made that we can potentially share with life beyond, whatever that means? So I'm also thinking about a lot, quite often, what will these other intelligences be? Who are we attempting to communicate with? And what is it that we want to share? So thank you so much for including me.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, and the golden records are an incredible tribute to what humans were thinking of who and what we were in 1977. Famously on the records, they are actual playable records. There's instructions on the front of the cover of how to play a phonograph and listen to the record if any alien could ever figure that out. And on the record, there are voices of various people saying hello from the people of Earth. There's whale sounds. There's a lot of music. There's Chuck Berry. There's also famously the sound of an echocardiogram of a human who's in love, thinking her thoughts of the person she cares for. And so there's a lot of really interesting things about that message, but we also now wonder, like, would aliens ever first play the message? And on top of that, would they understand anything about this message? Was it a message really for aliens, or was it a message about us at that period in time?
And when thinking about perspective, we are aliens to these potential other beings, right? We are the ones setting out the golden record, the messages out there. So how do we want to be perceived, right? I think what we were discussing earlier with Amy and Graham, when we put things like this out in the universe, are we really trying to communicate with them, or are we trying to communicate with ourselves? Are we trying to redefine who we are ourselves and why we do the things we do, right? Do you want to develop that a little bit?
Yes, I think two things to develop there. First, when it's called aliens, what are we actually referring to? Other intelligences, post-humans, future humans? Who are we? What are we envisioning that we could potentially be communicating with? And then what is the best of what we want to share? So maybe first we can discuss this term, aliens.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we use the term, for extraterrestrial aliens of life that comes from elsewhere, life that is different. And oftentimes people think about it, like the little green men, the gray aliens from the X-Files, or Star Trek aliens that are very humanoid and
we
how they
discussed
appear.
not to bring that up.
But that's a very common topic in my field to discuss. When people think about aliens, they think about sci-fi images they've seen in movies or television shows. But thinking about alien, it's not just place, it's also time. And so think about, our ancestors on this planet from 100+ million years ago. Think about walking dinosaurs on this earth. They're very much alien to what we are now on the planet, and they share the same biosphere and much of the same biological lineage, the same creation from the cosmos coming to what we are now, but in a different time. And so, a meeting like XPANSE makes me think a lot about where technology is going, artificial intelligence. Are we creating the new aliens right now? And so looking back from now, a century from now, a millennium from now, an eon from now, what kind of aliens will we be to future generations?
And from my perspective, in architecture, right, we are going farther and farther in the solar system. That's not the universe quite yet. So we are planning to go back to the moon, right? In the next few years, Artemis 3 mission, we're gonna hit the surface again. A lot of people are asking me who are outside the space industry, why are we going to space? There are like so many things going on Earth. Why are we spending all that money and all that? Another environmental concern about going to space is, are we contaminating these places, right? If the moon was full of living organisms that we didn't know how to find yet, and we're contaminating the surface regolith, like how do we know? How do we know the difference, right? So architecturally, we have to be very aware of how we do the things we do, what kind of policies and regulatory bodies are put in place to make sure that we do things the right way, so the astrobiologists of the world can do their work properly. The people who design the architecture on the surface or on orbit are doing their work properly. And we also open the door to different ways of doing it, right? Like different space agencies and different companies and the commercial space industry are exponentially exploding right now in a good way. How do we make sure that we're doing it responsibly?
Yeah, I love that. Every species is an invasive species when it's put into a new ecosystem. But there's the question, like, can we be a sustainable invasive species if we go to Mars, for instance, or even on the moon. I mean, it's less likely on the moon that there'd be a biosphere there, but there's some potential. There's at least some history of life from Earth on the moon for us to find. But say we send astronauts to Mars and they start settling in habitats, those habitats will leak some amount of material out into the Martian environment around them. There's leakage from the International Space Station of material going out into space around the space station. There's leakage from our submarines and our underwater habitats. This happens anytime we go exploring. And so for a place like Mars, how can we be thoughtful about trying our best to control this? And if there is a spread, a contamination of Earth life, how do we limit it if it does actually impact a potential biosphere that could be there?
I'd actually like to add on to this for even the moon, and something for us to all consider. So a few of my projects are sending DNA into space. Some are being stored on the moon in a synthetic amber, and some are going on an asteroid into deep space, including the Golden Archive. There's going to be a copy stored on the moon and a copy that's being sent into deep space. Now this holds data, information, but it also holds DNA. And now to me, this is one of the most intelligent things we can share. It's not a re-presentation. It's not expecting that something or someone might have eyes or might have sensory experiences that can read or somehow interpret and understand this. We're actually sharing the fundamentals, intelligence of life. Now this could potentially, if it's on an asteroid, crash into the right conditions, potentially spawn new life. This is one of the theories of how life on Earth got started, but it can also cause deep problems and contamination. When we think about the moon and putting an archive there, this audience I more think of like future humans. And I think we might have talked about this last night, like opening King Tut's tomb. These were past humans, and we learned so much about them. There's still so much knowledge that we don't understand about who these people were. But it also caused people to die. There was microbes there. Like, what if in this DNA we're sharing COVID, the coronavirus, and then it's reopened 5,000 years from now and causes a problem? So even if it isn't directly impacting the ecosystem, it could directly impact the finders with this wide range of opportunities, from really positive potentials to really negative outcomes. So if we don't know the intended audience, and we have a really difficult time foreseeing billions of years into the future, how do we do our best to share something that we hope will be life-enhancing and for the best and highest good of the finders?
And what you're talking about is a wonderful North Star to look into, far in the future. You work in billion years in the future, which, in my world is, I don't even think about that, right? I think 50 years in the future at most.
And I'll mention billion years because the materials, some of these materials like the Corning ceramics that the information is written on, is billion-year materials. These ambers are billion-year materials we know from dinosaurs in the deep time in the past that we can extract DNA. So we're trying to think across these scales.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up DNA, because DNA to me is connected to life. And maybe, Graham, you can go a little bit deeper on like what defines life for us non-astrobiologists. And DNA is also a testament to resilient systems, right? When you look at nature doesn't have one thing that does one thing, and then if that thing doesn't work, the whole thing dies, right? There are other systems, whether it's a fungus system, a bacterial system, an environment system, that will help that one system survive in the most extreme environments sometimes, right? There's this level of resilience. And as an architect, I'm trying to emulate that level of resilience. But because we have to work with engineers who usually break down problems down to first principles and then rebuild them from there, there's not enough space or enough brain power to start thinking remotely close to what nature is doing in terms of resilience. So let's get inspired by what DNA, what life, what natural resilience system can teach us to design a better way, right? And architecture for a long time, and architecture in extreme environment for a long time was purely based on function, right? If I can send a human up to space and bring them down alive, however sick or disoriented or long time for recovery it is, that's not the problem. The problem is keeping them alive. But we're at a stage of space right now where we have to go beyond that. In order for the commercial space industry to be viable, we need to send a lot more people up there. And really thinking about those resilience systems, the fact that you and me and every person on the audience has a different relationship to life and a different relationship to difficult things happening in life. We have to design systems that are resilient enough to adapt to each and every one of us.
Yeah, I love that so much. I will come back for one moment to this like, what is life? What is the definition of life? And it might freak you out to learn that we actually don't know what life is. There have been over 300 attempts at a definition of life, and no single definition is very well accepted. There's one called the NASA definition, that life is a self-contained chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution, and even that one has a lot of issues because life is resilient, just like DNA is resilient. DNA is our information storage molecule. We're getting better at characterizing a lot of the things that life does, but honestly, we just don't know. We might see signs of life out there, alien life, and we might miss them entirely because we're so focused on ourselves that we're not thinking, again, not only about aliens in place, but also maybe in time. Maybe we're not thinking of how a human offspring, some thousands of years from now, whatever the next civilization is that comes after us, whether it's AI or some other biological species, how it's going to think about the messages we're creating now. And so we do want to think about like resilience and the kind of messages we share, the way information is passed along, because we don't know what life is, and we might be wildly different from whatever comes next.
To mention also non-carbon life. Like we're often looking for carbon-based life, but it might be something that we don't know how to measure at all, to complement what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So the packages that I'm sending up have DNA. They also have an AI LLM, which is really interesting for me to think about this like speculative future, that this could potentially be like a Rosetta Stone for future finders to interpret what is included. But this also opens up a whole funny arena of speculation, especially where we are at the very beginning stages of AI and LLMs and hallucinations, and how will this be interpreted in the future? Another level of representation that's so focused and so narrow as well. But it's a start. It's a start.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we open up the questions?
Sure. I think
and see what people are thinking about aliens? What is alien? Why alien?
Other intelligences.
Other intelligences.
Yes. Post-life.
Yeah.
Post-human life.
Do we have any questions or comments? Yeah?
Hello? Hi. Yeah, so I've done a lot of research into space myself, and I found that when we actually do go to Mars, we're going to be using organisms a lot, whether it's in like bioreactors to make oxygen or anything like that. So how could the organisms we use interact with any that are potentially up there already?
Oh, I love that so much. Everything is changing right now with our technologies, and we're getting better and better at doing biologically integrated technological development. So much is going on that realm, from medicine discovery and things like that. New building materials. We're thinking of making a new form of concrete using fungus for Mars, for instance. Using extremophiles we find in the environment to help us harness energy on Mars. And we don't know. To answer your question truthfully, we just don't know what's going to happen. Even in the best planning in our engineering, we don't know what's going to happen if we meet alien life and it integrates with our life on Mars, or if we bring it back to Earth. We have really no idea, but we can think through the problem by at least trying to envision the changes that happen to life as we know it.
We could also use our exponential technologies like AI to model out future case scenarios, but I'd add to, and you can, I think, speak to this even more thoroughly, that when we have organisms and we're using them on other planets or exchanging them, they will inevitably change over time. So what we know is a certain organism here, or that we bring back from there, even in a bioreactor condition, will be vastly different. And these are some things that, yes, we can do our best to model, to think through in multiple dimensions, but we really, really don't know until it's there and exposed for a long period of time.
I mean, the reason why we're so attracted to space is that everything you do in space is basically for the first time, right? And that's fun, right? And because it's for the first time, there's a fine line between taking the risk to explore and also being responsible about it, which is why, creators, engineers, business people, and policymakers have to work hand in hand to make sure that whatever we do, nationally or internationally, or beyond the realms of this planet, makes sense.
Absolutely. We have a question over here.
Hello. Hello. My question is, we want to send people to the Mars, but the main problem is heavy radiation. What do you think? Its solution is to find how to protect people in long journey to Mars, or provide some modification or body which is adopted to this radiation.
Yes, both things. One of my favorite instruments was the radiation assessment detector. It was on board the Curiosity rover. It's the only instrument sent to Mars that we turned on the way to Mars. Its job was to measure the radiation environment on the way there, and it's been on ever since. It's been measuring the radiation environment across the surface of Mars. Because of this instrument called RAD, the radiation assessment detector, we know there's a lot more radiation in the space environment during transit for astronauts, and even more radiation on the surface of Mars. Not enough that it will guarantee cancer, but it's definitely going to be a problem. However, there are lots of ways to engineer without augmenting humans for that environment. We could build our habitats inside of lava tubes. That would help fix it. We can bury our habitats in what's called regolith. It's the Martian soil. We can just basically put dirt on top of the habitats, and just a few centimeters is all you need to limit the radiation coming in back to Earth levels. But the second part of your question is the really intriguing part is, not only can we augment humans or genetically engineer humans for the Martian environment, but maybe more importantly, should we do that? Is that like a next iteration of us traveling through space and exploring, is choosing to actually augment and change ourselves?
I mean, it starts with pre-selection, like who do we send to Mars, right? There were talks many years ago about sending older people to Mars, because in case they develop cancer, at least they've had a life, right? These are ethical questions that are always on the table when we design missions. And coming back to your question about radiation, radiation is absolutely important, especially on Mars. In the early phase of the crew transfer from the Earth to Mars, there's some protection that comes from the Earth's magnetic field, and then it goes away from there. However, although radiation is very important, there are other stressors that are, I would say, more urgent to solve. Like, how do we make people live healthily in microgravity? Because you age much, much faster in microgravity or partial gravity. The surface of Mars is about a third of Earth's gravity, and we actually don't know at this point what it does to the body. We have no idea. You've probably heard of the twin study, Mark and Scott Kelly, two twins who are basically genetically identical. One stayed on Earth, the other one was in space for almost a year, and they were basically doing comparative studies about what happens when one is isolated, when communication is delayed, when they live in microgravity, when they're exposed to certain levels of radiation, when they have extremely tight schedules from beginning of the day to the end. So it's really the full spectrum of stressors that we need to study rather than just radiation.
And I would mention, to complement this as well, we first often think physically, medically, things we can measure scientifically. But there's also all these impacts that occur emotionally, even spiritually. How does this change us as individuals and change our trajectory as humanity as we reach for the stars and go beyond? So I think maybe this is a good way to start to conclude our panel, to think about what we're doing here and now that will affect our future, that will project us into the far future.